How does God work in the messy situations of life? Glad you asked. Welcome to the Sift. My name is Nathan Eldridge. I'm here with my good friend, Jeff Holsclaw. We're two Christian guys having honest conversations about real life. And here at the Sift, there's always a seat at the table for you. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Nathan. Episode 8.
The big 8.
Oh,
Yeah, man, it's happening.
what are we going to do on the 10th one?
I don't know. We're going to celebrate. We're going to New York. I don't know. Something. Let's do something big.
Yeah.
Man, I'm really excited about this episode,
I am.
and I'm just going to tell you that's a change because when I'm reading the story and I come across Genesis chapter 38 and we're talking about Judah and all the mess in the situation, I was like, yeah, why don't we just skip that chapter?
That's right. We've
Let's
talked
move
about
on past
we're doing a series on Joseph, and this is a segue off of Joseph
Yeah.
back onto his family, describing what's going on with the family while he is sold off into captivity. Right?
Yeah. So do you know what's in Genesis 38? Have you read that? If you haven't, we're going to look at it today, but I'm telling you, it
Buckle
is
up.
a messy situation. Yeah, and so I'm just glad nobody does this, kind of put all my family history out on paper like this. This is,
That's right.
but I'm sure there's some mess in my closet, my family closet, so to speak.
Yep.
Well, today what we want to do as we tackle this episode is we really want to talk to you about how God works in those messy situations of life, because the truth is life is messy. And what we're going to see today is there are times when we sin and do things that are foolish, and it has terrible consequences for us, for other people. But there's also times when we're sinned against, where people do things and it has negative, painful consequences, lasting consequences for us that we can't undo. But we have to learn how to live with that. And the question is, when all that's happening, how's God working in the midst of those messy situations? That's really what we want to dig into today on the Sift.
That's a perfect contrast because Joseph's in a painful situation that others did to him. We're fixing to see where Judah is going to be in a painful situation because of what he did to himself.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's. I think the way we're going to try to peel the onion and approach the subject today is we just want to talk about how do we get into these messy situations, how do we get into the mess, and then each step along the way, we're going to see that God gives us grace, and that there are ways that God is at work in and through even the messiest, painful situations that you and I face. And so, number one, how do we get into these messy situations? And I think the first thing we're going to see in this chapter is that one of the ways we get ourselves in a mess is by distancing ourselves from God's people. I'm not trying to, let me just, can I pause and say this? I'm not trying to preach on this thing. This is not about sermons. It's not about that.
You should be.
Yeah, well,
I need it.
well, I'm a preacher, but I will tell you, when we're on here, we just want to have a conversation, and for us to give you some clear things to hang your thoughts on as we go along. The first one is when we start to distance ourselves from godly people, you better look out. You know, you're putting yourself in the danger zone.
Yeah.
And so let's look at the first few verses, and then we'll dive in. Any thoughts before I read?
No, I wanted you to read verse 1
Okay, let's
because
do it.
this is, and I want you to pause just for a minute because I had a thought on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Verse 1, Genesis 38:1. And it happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira.
Yeah. So that was what you just mentioned when we start to separate ourselves from God's plan, right? And I'm not a smart man. I don't know much, but an Adullamite, man, that sounds like a group of people that could clear a bar, right? Adullamite.
Yeah.
I've been saying that all week. Adullamite.
Yeah.
Adullam was this city in Canaan, right? And they were in this family, this covenant family of Abraham was given directions. Hey, don't marry, don't intermingle with the Canaanites because they worship false gods. Step one is our boy Judah. Verse 1, chapter 8 is in that
Right.
together. And we're going to get to say Adullamite again because he's in two other places in here that seems to be a lifelong friend of his.
Yeah, he's got this guy Hira. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I think part of this is he turns aside. There may have been some tension. We don't know. It doesn't say it exactly, but Judah's like the fourth in line. here, and his older brothers seem to have done some pretty heinous things. Reuben went in to Jacob's wife, and that was a bad thing. So he seems to kind of disqualified himself from the firstborn rights and all that stuff. And then you've got Simeon and Levi who go in and they slaughter the people at Shechem, and so that's bad news. So the next person in line is Judah, and we know Judah is going to end up playing an important part in the whole unfolding of redemptive history, if you will, because it's the line of the tribe of Judah that's Jesus Christ.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Judah has this child that we're going to see here. From that child comes Christ.
It's
From
gonna,
that- from
we're
that
going to
line.
trace that line, absolutely, and it's going to go through. You're going to see it picked up in the
Yeah.
book of Ruth, and then you're going to see it picked up in the genealogy of Jesus.
How reassuring is that
Oh my
from
goodness.
mess can come our Savior?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a
That's
huge
the way
part.
that's
of
the way it
this.
has to be, right? Because we're all a mess.
And that, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in the first few verses, Judah leaves his brothers. He separates from his brothers. Judah is among Joseph's brothers, and but he separates himself, goes down to see his friend in Adullam, an Adullamite. That is a. But it says there, when he got there, Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took the daughter of Shua, and he went into her. She conceived, bore a son, called his name She conceived again, bore another son, called his name Onan. And yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. And then Judah was in Kezib when she bore him. And so all this to say, in the first part of this, Judah is separating himself. He's putting distance between his family and himself. He's separating himself. And I think it's danger. It's danger zone when you do that. I think whenever you remove yourself from the people of God and you begin to move into the territory of non-believing people, it doesn't mean we can't have unbelieving friends. Not saying that.
That's right.
I've got friends who are not believers. Not saying we can't have friends, but I'm saying the people with whom, the people that are most influential in our lives, do not need to be people who are not gospel believing Christians. If we're believers, we just need to be careful about the people who shape and influence our values and our thinking. And what ends up happening is Judah puts himself in this situation, and he starts to act like the people around him. I mean, this is like Lot. When Lot, earlier in Genesis, he moves toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and that just proves to be bad news when he moves over there.
Yep.
So we just got to be careful. But here's what I would say to your point, and I'll say this to our friends who are watching, all 10 of you who are watching this thing. God absolutely will allow us to make a mess of our lives. We have the freedom and the agency to make a wreck of things, to make bad choices, to do foolish things. But we have to know and find security and hope in the fact that nothing we can do can ever thwart the plan of God. So you can make a wreck of your life, but you can't mess up the plans of Almighty God. In His infinite wisdom, in His sovereign power, in His amazing grace, He can take even the most foolish things and wicked things that we do and somehow weave them into His plan to bring about good. It's amazing. And so, but we can make a mess of things.
Yeah. Case in point, Judah is 2 steps into trouble, right? His buddy is a Canaanite, and then he marries this no-named wife Canaanite, right? So
Right.
he is embedded in that. He's embedded in that community.
Yeah. And that seems to say something about where he is spiritually. It seems to be reflective of his spiritual condition.
That's right.
That's where he finds himself now.
Yeah. Worshiping these other gods, or at least being so comfortable with it that his best friend is Canaanite, and the no-name wife is Canaanite as well. It's now his family.
Man, I think my wife would be so mad at me if I never used her name.
Yeah.
If I never actually I'm not going to call her name. But I think it would be terrible. It's like
There's no mention of her name.
make it. No, that's terrible. So how else can we get into a mess? One, we can distance ourselves from godly people, from the people of God. But another way that we can really get ourselves into a mess that kind of unfolds in this story with Judah is we can ignore wickedness that's around us. And when I say that, we can ignore it by acting like it doesn't. We just leave it. We're passive. We don't address it. And it doesn't mean we can stop what people are doing that's wicked. It doesn't mean that. But we can't ignore it and act like it doesn't matter. That's not the right response.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening with Judah is he has these sons, and Onan and Shelah, and and Onan are some knuckleheads. Like,
Yeah.
they really are some wicked guys, and there seems to be a pattern that you see several times in the Bible. You see it with Jacob, where he has these sons who have seething hatred for one of their brothers, and who knows if he told them to knock it off, stop it. But there's no indication that he actually addressed all the hatred that Joseph's brothers had for him.
Right.
And then here, Judah has three sons, and at least two of them we know were really wicked guys, and the Lord took them out. And so there's no indication that Judah addressed the wickedness in his sons. Later, this becomes a problem with Eli.
Right.
There's times in the Bible where when people are passive, and let me just say, in these particular instances I mentioned, when men are passive, it creates major problems. Years ago, a guy named Larry Crabb wrote a book. It's called The Silence of Adam. The Silence of Adam. And he's talking about Genesis chapter 3, where Satan comes into the garden and he tempts Eve, and Adam is apparently right there and says nothing. He sees the evil, he sees the wickedness, and he does nothing to stop it.
Yeah.
And so what in the world is that about? It says Eve takes the fruit. She sees that it's good. She takes the fruit, and it says, and she gave it to her husband who was with her. It's as if he's standing there watching this unfold and is silent. And so it seems that Jacob was silent. At least it seems that way. Judah seems to be silent about the wickedness. And so we just have to be careful when it comes to being silent.
I'm glad I never heard that about Adam presented that way. I'm glad you brought that up, and it's something that worries me about today. That you look across the local churches, and I just don't see the young men filling the pews anymore.
Yeah.
And to me, becoming a regular member of a Bible-believing church as a young man, as a young father, is just as a man, whether you're a father or not, is the most important thing you can do in your life. Not only for you, but for your family, for your future family, for you.
Yeah.
It without that grounding in the church, and I say that tied to Christ, you're going to find yourself in want. And so thanks for bringing that up about Adam. I never heard that about just the passivity of men these days, just to let things go on that are not right. And you don't know they're not right because we've been watered down by society today, and you don't have a place to go to and hear the gospel, the good news.
Yeah. And well, what you said about being in church and it changing your life and that being the most important thing you can do. I'm telling you, I became a Christian as a college student, and getting involved in the church, finding mentors, finding men, finding friendship among believers, it changed the course of my life. I mean, it simply changed the course of my life. And I think a lot of men struggle at church because they don't feel like they have friends, or maybe they feel like things are superficial, but it's not all like that.
No, it's not.
It's just not like that. And right now there are, I think it would be kind of a straw man argument that there are imperfect churches, but I'm just going to tell you, the church, as far as I know, the church is the only organization on the planet where, in order to join, you have to say, I'm a sinner. I mean, it's the only place. So you got a whole building full of people who readily acknowledge, I messed up and I need help. I need the grace of God. And so if you come into a church like that with hundreds of people that are messed up, you can just expect it's not going to be a perfect church. There's going to be struggle. There's going to be challenge. But that's just the nature of life in this world. And so please don't let the imperfection of the church keep you from the blessing of the church, because you need it. It changed my life. And I tell you, when it comes to the passivity of men, you don't want to go the other end. So on the one hand, you have men who are passive. And when men are passive, somebody's going to step forward to try to fill that gap, because men are not leading in a healthy way. leading in a healthy way for a man does not mean like ruling with an iron fist or being aggressive or anything like that. It's just, I believe in non-toxic masculinity, right? The kind of masculinity where a man leads with strength and humility, where he has conviction and he has compassion. I believe in the kind of masculinity that looks a lot like Jesus, who was no pushover,
Right.
who was a man of great passion and wisdom and strength. And I'm telling you, when a woman looks at her husband and sees Christ in her husband, or when a young woman looks at a young man, and sees Christ in that young man, she sees strength. She sees somebody that's wise, somebody that will lean into hard things, somebody that can lead well with character. Not because he has a position and he's like, no, you're going to do what I say because I have this title or this position. Not that. That is about as far from biblical masculinity as it can get. Biblical masculinity sounds like Jesus in Mark 10:45 when he says, the Son of Man, which, by the way, is the figure in the book of Daniel that has all power and authority over all kingdoms.
Mhm.
The Son of Man is a big deal. He says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve
God.
and to give his life as a ransom for many.
That's right.
That is the kind of man that people will follow. And that's not a man who is overbearing. It's not a man who's petty. It's not a man who's insecure. It's a man who is secure in the sight of God, who lives his life before the face of God. That's the kind of man people want to follow. That's a sexy man.
Son,
I'm
I've
just
heard.
telling you.
I've hit a nerve, man. God.
Sorry.
Sorry, we're 15 minutes into this thing, and we're verses in. What?
Y'all better. It's gonna be a long one today. So,
No,
That's beautiful.
but so what else?
I
So
like it. I
so
like it.
let's talk about what else we can do to get ourselves in trouble. So we see his two sons are wicked in this passage, and he really doesn't seem to do anything about it.
God kills them.
Yeah,
Both.
it says they both. What does it say? It says verse 7. It says, but which was Judah's firstborn son, it says he was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. And
It
then,
doesn't even tell what the wickedness was. It doesn't
No.
give any. It's just like he was so wicked, put him to death.
Yeah. And then a couple verses later, where is it? Verse 10, talking about his next son, his Judah's second son, Onan. It says what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also.
Yeah, should we talk
So-
about that?
Well, I mean, I
But-
think there's accountability. I think that sin deserves death. And what I mean by that is whenever somebody sins, the penalty for that sin is not a slap on the wrist. It's not it's not something small, but whenever we sin, the consequence, the natural consequences goes all the way back to Genesis. And God says, when you do this, you will die. And that death has to happen. There has to be some payment made for the sin. And the good news of the gospel is that Jesus was the one who was willing to die for my sin so that I wouldn't have to die for it.
I'm not a. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm not a Bible.
Oh, whatever. You
Yeah,
are. Yeah.
But you see a few places in the Bible where it says, well, God put him to death, and really I can think of these two, and in Ananias and Sapphira.
Oh, yeah.
in
And
Acts.
yeah.
But and I started thinking, wow, that is rough, man. That's hard to look at, kind of,
Mhm.
But it seems both of those times when God made that call to do that, that there was some big new thing happening, a new movement that could not be corrupted, right?
Mhm.
Like this is here when this covenant family is
Yeah.
starting, and in Acts the church was just starting.
Absolutely.
You can't have any of that nonsense in
It's kind of an inflection point.
yeah, like, hey, look,
Yeah.
this is we can't have nonsense in this fledgling group.
Right, right. Man, that's a really great point. So, when you think about something that really changed the way that I read the Bible is understanding that the Bible is just one big story. It's lots of stories inside, but it begins with creation, it ends with new creation. It begins in the garden, it's going to end in the city of God. It's God dwelling with his people in the garden in the beginning, God dwelling with his people in the end. I mean, it's one big overarching story. So if you think of the Bible like a timeline, what you're saying, Jeff, is that there are some key moments on that timeline. And this is when the nation of Israel is in its inception.
Yeah, it's just
So
starting, right?
The original audience that would have been hearing the story of Joseph and reading the story about Judah and Tamar, they would have been the nation of Israel wandering in the wilderness under Moses' leadership. They would have been the ones hearing the story for the first time, those early generations of Israelites. And so, this was a critical kind of pivotal moment, and I think that's a great insight to say it's at moments like this that the Lord has to really protect this fledgling nation as it's coming into being, so to speak. That's a great point.
And God will protect, and like you said, His plan won't be thwarted. It's gonna happen. And man, if you're wicked beyond belief, well, you might just be taken care of, right? In situations like this.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you better be living right. That's all I'm saying. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So we
Good
can
luck.
get in a mess when we ignore wickedness. Here's another thing that comes around. Another thing is we can get in a real mess when we do not keep our word. This is another part of the story here, where Judah, his first son uh, uh,
Name.
yeah, well that becomes Tamar's
Ruined that
husband.
name.
Ur.
Nobody's named anymore.
No, they're not. I'm glad my firstborn wasn't named Ur.
Yeah.
Although anyway, I'm not gonna get my kids' names, but so Judah took a wife for Ur, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. And Tamar is a woman, this Canaanite woman in the story, who plays a really important role in this story. And we're gonna see how God works in her life as well. But Ur marries Tamar, and then Ur dies, and then Judah goes and gets his second son, Onan, and says, "Hey, I need you to fulfill the duty of a family member, and I need you to go to Tamar and have a son to kind of carry on the family name." And Onan doesn't want to do it because he's like, for whatever reason, the inheritance is going to go to her son, and it won't really be my son. It'll be my brother's son because I'm doing this on his behalf, and I don't want to do it. And so he refuses to do it. And as a result, the Lord takes him out. And then the other son, Shelah, the third son, is not quite old enough to get married yet. And so Judah, the father-in-law, he says, "Hey, Tamar, I don't want you to go off and marry somebody else. I want you to stay in your father's household. Stay here and wait, and I'll give you our third son, Shelah. When he gets old enough, I'll give him to you to be your husband. So just wait, if you will." And she does. She waits. And Judah does not keep his word.
Mm-mm.
Shelah grows up, and Shelah goes about his business. He's going to get married, and Judah never gives him to Tamar to be her husband. And now she's just left hanging. What do I do? And that's where this really sticky situation comes in. So we're going to read it. You need to read some of this stuff. I always have to do the reading.
I'm dyslexic.
Why do you make me do all that?
Well, you can read. If I could read, I'd be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
preacher.
Well, let me read this, and I'm going to pick up. This is the part of the story where Judah doesn't keep his word.
What verse you on?
Let's go to verse 12.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yes.
So verse 12, it says, "In the course of time, the wife of Judah," you remember we don't know her name, she's just Shua's daughter, she died.
Yes.
So Judah is now a widower. And it says, "When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite."
Adullamite.
That he said.
Yeah.
And when Tamar, the one who's waiting for this third son, when she finds out that her father-in-law is going up, this is what happens. When Tamar was told, quote, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," it says she took off her widow's garments and she covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and she sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah, because she saw that Shelah, the one she was waiting on, was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. So Judah didn't keep his word.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it says, so she's dressed up in a veil. Nobody knows who she is. Verse 15, when Judah gets to town and he sees her, Judah thinks that Tamar is a prostitute because she covered her face. And so he turned to her at the roadside and he said, "Come and let me come into you." For he didn't know that this was Tamar. He didn't know this was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "Well, what will you give me? Like, how are you going to pay me? You going to Venmo me? What are you going to do? It's going to be PayPal? What are you going to do? That you may come into me." And he says, "Well, I'll send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "Well, if you give me a pledge," because he didn't have the payment with him. So she's like, "If you'll give me a pledge until you send it." And he said, "Well, what kind of pledge do you want me to give you?" And she replied, "Well, give me your signet and your cord and your staff that's in your hand." And so he did. He gave them to her, and then he went into her, and she got pregnant. She conceived. And then Judah left and went away. And when he left, Tamar changed her clothes again. She took off her veil, put back on her widow's garments, and went back. Okay? So the point of this, and this kind of leaves us hanging, and like, oh my goodness, now the father-in-law has gotten his daughter-in-law pregnant, and what in the world is going to happen now? But this mess came about because Judah did not keep his word.
No, he didn't.
He just did not keep his
Yeah,
word.
Judah was thinking, this woman is trouble. She's done. Two of my boys have been killed messing around with her. I got Sheila, one more. I'm not going to subject him to this possible outcome.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Sends her off. She goes, lives back with her dad or whatever, and really does not intend to fulfill that promise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tamar's sees that Shayla's old enough that, wow, I should be having a kid. What about me? What about me? And it's not happening. So she says, she's sort of conniving, right? I'll get a kid one way or another. And sweet talks the old widower into swapping her body for a goat.
Man, that's bad news.
I know it.
But I mean, there's all kind of stuff here in my mind. But the key thing here, there's all kind of stuff we could talk about in this passage. But the one thing I just want to highlight, because I know we're going to run out of time before too long, is the fact that Judah just didn't keep his promise for whatever reason. And I think for you and I, if you've been telling somebody that you're going to do something and you don't do it, eventually they're going to want to take action. If you won't take action, I'm going to get around to it. I'm going to get what they those things they called
The round
to it. You know, I think my grandpa gave me
my
round to it.
mom had one. Yeah.
A little round coin or a wooden coin that said round to it. You know, I'm going to give you something to get around to it anyway. But all that to say, I don't know if you're delaying something, if there's something that you need to be doing that you've committed to do, but you keep postponing. But get after it.
Yeah.
Like you need to keep your word. You don't. Jesus talks about this in the Gospels. He says, "Look, you need to let your yes be yes and your no be no. If you said you were going to do something,
Do it.
You need to do it. You need to make it
if at all possible. And if you can't, go to them and say, hey, look, this came up. This became impossible. But don't just let it sit.
Right. That to me, in a way, is reflective of being passive.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, eventually it frustrates you. Can you imagine? I mean, I think most of us experience, if there is any doctors or dentists watching, I mean, no offense, but when you have to wait a long time and in the doctor's waiting room, they can't help that. Sometimes they have huge caseloads and they can't help that. But it's tough when you have to wait and wait and wait. It's hard. And if there's somebody in your life, a child, that's waiting and waiting and waiting for you to keep your word, or a spouse that you've made a commitment to and they keep waiting and you won't do it. If they've asked you to do something, and it could be they've asked you to go to counseling, they've asked you to go to church, they've asked you to help them with something, whatever the case may be, you don't need to keep putting that off, because you're putting them in a hard position where they're going to feel like they have to do it. And so the fact that Judah wouldn't keep his word left Tamar feeling like, well, if he's not going to do something, I have to do it.
I'm going to take care of it.
So we need to fulfill our word. And if we haven't, today's a fresh day. You get up, you dust yourself off, and by God's grace, you go and you do whatever it is you need to do. But if you don't, you're going to get yourself in a jam, and you're going to put people in a jam. It may be at work that you've been waiting to do something and you need to get after it, or they may be getting after you before too long. So, next thing, we're gonna keep pushing here. Another thing we can do to get ourselves into a mess is we can try to hide our sin. We can try to cover it up. And I think it's interesting here because in this story, Judah tries to make good on his payment, right? He told her, I'm going to give you a goat. I'm going to give you this goat. I'm going to. If I said that to my wife, I don't know how she would receive that.
Hey, I got
anniversary gift of all anniversary gifts.
Something here.
So, verse 20 says this. So Judah, after this whole episode where, Judah sends the young goat back. He sends it by his friend, the Adullamite, right, to take back this pledge that he'd made from the woman's hand. But the guy couldn't find her because remember, Tamar, she wasn't really a prostitute there in town. She had just pretended to be. So the guy goes to make payment and she's not there. And the guy asked the men in place, he's like, hey, where's that?
Where's the cult prostitute? And they said,
Yeah.
there's no cult prostitute. What are you
Right.
talking about?
And so as a result of that, he goes back to Judah and he's like, hey, I couldn't find the lady you're talking about. And the men of the place said there really isn't any prostitute, no cult prostitutes been there. And so Judah, he's like, hey, well, you know what? Let's just leave it alone. Let's just let her keep the
tried,
stuff
but,
that I gave her, the signet ring, the staff that was mine. Let's just let her hang on to that stuff. I don't want to make a big deal out of this, right? We don't want to call attention to all this stuff. And so let's just let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak. And in that case, man,
Hey,
can you
hey,
believe
uh,
how rude is that?
I,
Oh my
oh,
goodness.
oh, Lord, help us. Can you edit that
So,
out?
yeah. All that to say, he doesn't want this to come to light.
Yeah.
And when you and I try to hide things, when we don't want things that we've done, indiscretions or problems, sin, if we want to call it sin, in this case it was sin. If we don't want it to come to light, we will try to cover it up.
Yeah.
And that is bad news. And we can get ourselves in a mess when we do that. I'll tell you a quick funny story. I may have told this before. You may have heard me tell this story. But if my stepmother Valerie ever watches this, and she'll know, she could tell the story way better than I could. But I was around junior high. I was probably in the 6th or 7th grade, maybe 8th grade, something like, maybe going on. Anyway, I was young. And we lived in a house that had 2 levels, and there was going from all the bedrooms in that wing of the house up into the living room, there were about 3 steps. And, I was just horsing around, jumping from one side. I would jump up, hurry down the hallway and jump up into the next level just because it was a couple steps. And one day I was horsing around and I busted a hole in the wall. And I was like, oh, man. So I busted a hole in the wall and I went and I got a picture and I put a nail in the wall and I hung it over that hole in the wall. The problem is that hole was about 10 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
And so she comes home and sees this picture hanging down by the ground. And she's like, so Nathan had been decorating the house? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean?
That been there?
So all that to say, I my foolishness, I thought I could cover it up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't going to happen. So anyway, all that to say, your sin will find you out.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't know what you're doing right now, but if you're trying to cover something, if you're trying to hide something, man, it can just eat your lunch. If that's where you are, I just want to encourage you to turn back to the Lord and confess what you've done to Him first and foremost. Ask for His forgiveness, and then ask for His help to bring this to light wherever it needs to be brought to light, in the relationship, at work, wherever it might be. But if you try to just hang on to this and hide it, it's going to eat your lunch. And but if you confess and you turn, Scripture says that God is just full of grace, that wherever sin abounds, grace much more abounds. Wherever we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive and to cleanse us from all our unrighteousness. And so I just want to encourage you to turn away from it, confess it, and find the freedom, the forgiveness, the hope that you can only find in Christ. Last thing, and then I know we're pressing our time here. Last thing in this story is we can really make a mess when we have double standards. At the end of this story,
Yeah.
at the end of the story, it seems clear that Judah has a double standard here. And that's what comes to light. We'll see this at the end. I'll read it real quick. It says, about 3 months later, Judah finds out that it comes to light that Tamar is pregnant. Oh my goodness. Verse 24 says, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Oh my goodness. Moreover, she's pregnant by this immorality, which is actually a word. The word immorality is a word for prostitution. She has become pregnant by being a prostitute. And Judah gets fired up. And Judah says, well, bring her out and let her be burned. Wow. And she was being brought out. As she was being brought out, she sent word to Judah, her father-in-law, and she sends those things that he had given her as a pledge, the signet ring, all that. And so it says, by the man to whom these belong, I'm pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these belong to, the signet, the cord, and the staff. And Judah saw it, and he was like, oh, man. Oh, man. He says, she, Tamar, is more righteous than I am. since I did not give her my son, or give her to my son Sheila as a wife. And it says he didn't know her again.
Dude, that is awesome, right? Because you think of, he's trying to cover this up, trading off with the goat, him and his buddy from Adullam, trying to cover it up, finds out she's pregnant. Oh, I can finally get rid of her. This is reason to burn her. This is just.
Yeah.
And these items, and we don't know the full situation, but these items get returned back to Judah, and he does not try to cover that up, like try to hide it and say, "Hey, I never received those things. These have been with me all the time. Somebody stole them from me."
Oh, right. Right.
He didn't dig a deeper hole. He had this, what I think is this changing point in his mind, is this inflection where he immediately said, "She is more righteous than I."
Wow.
He changed. He didn't try to
Yeah.
dig himself deeper into a hole. He was presented with the truth, and it, man, he changed. And I think every person comes to that point in life, right? That, man, I'm sinful.
Mm,
It's my fault. I am in want. I need
right.
I need a savior.
Mm,
Judah's at this point where he's like, "Oh man, what have I done?
yeah.
I was about to burn this woman up. What have I done?"
It's a turning point.
Yes,
I think it
yes.
really is a turning point. And just so that you kind of frame this within Genesis, and then we'll wrap up here. Um, this is shaping Judah to play the role he's going to play in the story going forward. But this is a real turning point for him, morally, spiritually. It seems to be a turning point. And I'll say Genesis chapter 38, with this messy episode with a father-in-law, Judah, sleeping with his daughter-in-law, Tamar, and all that kind of stuff that happened, that stands in sharp contrast with the next chapter, where Joseph is a man of integrity in
Yeah.
Potiphar's house. It's like this night and day kind of contrast. And so that's another kind of part of this story, is just the way it's situated in the bigger Joseph story. Um, Man, look, in the midst of the messy situations of life like this is a I mean, can you imagine this being your family? Like, how do you go to your pastor with this kind of
Yeah.
stuff? I mean, this is messy stuff. In the midst of all that, God is graciously working out his plan, and no mess up by Judah is going to stop him. And so I don't know what is going on in your life, but or what has happened to you. Some of the things that happened in here to Tamar, they were not her choice. They were things that were done to her, but she also did some things that were not so good, right? The
Yeah.
fact that Judah didn't keep his word, that's on Judah. The fact that she deceived him and got pregnant, that's on her, even though she felt desperate. Um, so all that to say, in the midst of those messy situations, God is at work, and he is present, and that's certainly the case for Judah and Tamar, and it's true for you and me too. I want to give you something this week. We're going to start something new. I hope we'll do it regularly. I don't know if we'll do it every time, but we're going to do it today. You see this bookshelf behind us. I'm a reader, and one of the things we want to do is we want to give you something. We're going to call it On the Shelf, something that needs to be on your shelf. And that is this book. This week is by a guy named Steven Viars, and it's called Putting Your Past in Its Place. I came across this book over a decade ago, and it's just a phenomenal, I thought it was very helpful. And so I want to encourage you to pick it up and read it. It's called Putting Your Past in Its Place by Steven Viars. Uh, in this book, he gives, he's talking to people like Judah and Tamar, people who have made decisions in life that have made a real mess. Sometimes they're decisions that we've made that have caused consequences we can't undo. And sometimes people have made choices that we have to live with that we can't undo. And as a result of that, how do we make sense of that? Where's God in the midst of all that? And some of the helpful things that Stephen Viars does in this book, I'm going to give you a couple things. One, in this book, he gives really helpful categories, because there are things in your past where you and I, we have sinned and done bad things, and we can either respond well and we can repent and we can turn, or we can respond poorly and make it worse.
Yeah.
There are also times in our past where people have sinned against us, where they have done things to us, and we can respond well. We can
Like
we can be
Joseph.
merciful. Like Joseph, we can be merciful. We can be kind and gracious. We can be forgiving. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean anyway. There's so many nuances to all this. But there's also times where people sin against us and we respond poorly. We get bitter. We get hardened by it. And this just gives helpful categories. But another thing this book does is Steven Viars is just really honest about the situations in life. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He's honest about the things that can be done to us, the authentic suffering that we really can go through. And so I would encourage you to check it out. And the last thing he does is he constantly points to the true hope, the real comfort that we find in Jesus Christ over and over again. He just takes you back to the hope of the gospel. And so you need to have this on yourself, right? Putting Your Past in Its Place by Steven Viars. Great work. That being said, look, thanks for joining us this week. We'd love to hear from you. So put your comments, your insights down in the comments below. We'd love to know what you're thinking about this passage. If there's something you'd like for us to talk about at some point, let us know. We'll try to get to that. If you found today's conversation helpful or encouraging in some way, would you do us a favor and just like, share, and subscribe to the channel here? And then remember, at the Sift, you've always got a seat at the table. We'll see you next time.
God bless.